Hello, everyone. Welcome to Socio-Emotional Learning for Educational Equity, Teacher Candidate Perspectives from a Rural Regional Comprehensive University. My name is Susie Henning.
And I'm Torres from Eastern Washington University.
So we are here today to talk about socio-emotional learning for educational equity, or the SEALE certificate. This is a certificate that was developed by the School of Education and the School of Psychology to help prepare educators, social workers, and school psychologists to practice socio-emotional learning and to teach socio-emotional learning in classrooms. The SEALE certificate really uses the framework or the standards wheel from the Collaborative on Academic, Social, and Emotional Learning, or CASEL, and includes self-awareness, self-management, social awareness, relationship skills, and responsible decision-making skills. In the state where we practice, there are two other benchmarks or standards that are added to that wheel, and those are self-efficacy and social management. So for us, it's really important that we link socio-emotional learning skills to equity. And the way that we define that, where we teach, is that we're preparing candidates in this certificate and to be educators who are able to obviously, practice the skills and knowledge required for a standards-based, student-centered instruction. However, that's the minimum and not enough to be education for equity. They must also be able to create learning environments where students can achieve their full potential and be themselves, developing their identity in that process. And also, candidates are able to integrate these SEL skills to create classrooms that actually reduce the opportunity gap. For us, it is essential, and in our study, you'll see this, that we talk about purposeful embedding of SEL skills. And what we mean when we are describing that is that we're talking about instructing both explicitly and through modeling SEL skills. And we're giving an opportunity for practicing those skills, assessing those skills, and then feedback on the skills themselves. All of that is required to understand how socio-emotional learning skills and equity work together to achieve classrooms that can reduce the opportunity gap. So this presentation is really about a study that we are conducting. We're talking about the first phase of the study today, and specifically connections that we have found between teacher candidate perceptions of well-being and school climate. And so we are talking about this first phase of research, and our participants are candidates in our program. So a limitation of our study is the number of participants, but we did find through our analysis that real key takeaways came out of this first phase of the research for practice.
So this particular study was guided by the research question that's really looking at the correlation between well-being and positive school climate. So the survey that was used, we'll talk about in a minute, really give us some insight as to student well-being at the time of the survey, as well as their perceptions of school climate and aspects related to that. We intend to ask students at the beginning of the program, the middle of the program, the end of the program, where they've experienced SEL interventions, so we can see the growth over time. But this first portion of the study really just focuses on their first perceptions of well-being and positive school climate. We have really interesting findings based on the data that we collected from this first portion of the study.
So really, socio-emotional learning skills are something that CASEL has been promoting since the 1990s. And we are finding that socio-emotional learning skills are required for academic success, but really much more beyond that. They are lifelong skills for success. And they include really the ability to describe oneself, right? The ability to manage one's emotions, the ability to work well cooperatively in groups, to set goals and figure out steps to achieve them, and to have empathy with others. And really, when we're talking about resilience, right, we're talking about how all of these skills come together. So these are skills for success in school and beyond. And we're finding that these lack of skills, especially when they're embedded in some people's educational experience and not in others, becomes a real equity issue. And so only now, really, we're starting to see that because of the connection with equity and the importance for having resilience, right? Because of the pandemic and other things, that SEL is starting to be embedded in teacher preparation programs more intentionally and thoughtfully. And so what we have learned is that educators and adult SEL practitioners are essential to the process of bringing SEL and having SEL implemented in school buildings. Teachers have expressed a desire to understand SEL and use SEL as a methodology in their classroom, as a pedagogical practice. And teacher preparation programs are actually starting to do that much more intentionally in our state. This has probably been a 5-year effort. And so we are one of the first to really study how well the intentional embedding of SEL in the program impacts teacher candidates as they prepare to teach.
So the survey that was used to collect this data comes from a validated panorama survey about teacher experiences with SEL. So it's really focusing on the survey itself was adapted because it was made originally for teachers responding to their own experiences as teachers in school buildings. It has been modified slightly for teacher candidates so that it fit our context better. There's 119 questions on this survey, and it measures these 14 different constructs. And through these constructs, we're able to look at the correlation and interactions between different things, such as, the leadership practices here in the School of Education and its impact on student sense of well-being and belonging.
So in each of the categories of the survey, students completed selected response questions as well as open-ended response questions. And they were able to skip questions along the way. Each of the questions had a Likert scale selection of responses, something like a 5-point scale with strongly agree to strongly disagree. So an example of a selected response question in the survey is overall, how much do you learn about supporting your future students' socio-emotional learning from the instructors at the EWU School of Education? An example of a short answer or open response question was, what socio-emotional learning topics should our EWU School of Education focus on to better support your future students' socio-emotional growth? So we have asked teacher candidates to voluntarily complete the survey. They were selected based on their quarter in the program. Our students are cohorted, and so they were in their first quarter in the teacher education program. The responses are anonymous, and because we are the instructors in the program, we worked with our information technology services department to coordinate the link of the survey and to make sure that all of the responses remained anonymous for our students. The survey remained open for 14 days. It was an online survey using SurveyMonkey. And the survey results were disseminated using the SurveyMonkey dashboard and then raw data that we downloaded into SPSS as well as Excel.
So the data revealed 2 really important findings, which we really want to talk about today. Number 1 is that belonging and well-being are very strongly correlated. And the difference between well-being and belonging are, well-being was asking questions like, in the past week, how often have you felt exasperated or exhausted? How happy did you feel? How frequently were you feeling hopeful or engaged and excited? Whereas belonging questions were things like, how understood do you feel as a person? How connected to your peers do you feel? How much do you feel you matter to the university? And so, although not the same thing, it's not surprising that they were directly correlated. And the other really big significant finding was that leadership attributes, so how the School of Education is operated, actually was very strongly correlated to student well-being as well. And that was asking questions like, how well do the leadership set the tone for the program? How well do instructors and leaders respond to student feedback? And so we're going to talk about these 2 separate important findings in the next slides. So the first one that's really important was that overall belonging was a strong predictor of positive student well-being. And as we mentioned before, those includes things like if students felt like they mattered to the university, they tended to indicate higher ratings of being happy in the past week, being excited or engaged about learning. Something else that was interesting was the belonging was greatly determined by how strong the relationships those students had with their instructors. And questions that that were looking for the student instructor relationship included things like how friendly are your instructors? How much do you feel your instructors care about you? How supportive are your instructors? And how respectful are your instructors? And this was really an important finding for us because we can see the logic behind this correlation, and yet we don't always see this integrated into our instruction as educators. How well do we know our students, and how important is it that we learn their names right away and that we connect to students on a personal level? The next important finding was the well-being. So the sense of well-being was greatly determined by the leadership in the School of Education. And I think this is something that often gets overlooked. How important is it that the system in which students are a part of and they're benefactors of actually impacts their experiences? And so some of the questions included in the leadership were how positive is the tone set by instructors and leaders in the School of Education? How effectively is important information communicated? And how responsive is the School of Education to your feedback that you might provide?
I think this is really important information to share with our School of Education administration, because many times our dean and directors, they are less involved with students in course by course setting or as the actual instructor of a class. And so this is very helpful information for them to see the impact they still have on the well-being of candidates in our program. Thank you so much for your participation in our conversation today. Here are our references and here's our contact information. We look forward to hearing from you.
So